In the previous videos, we looked at a few different methods on how to build your templates inside of Cubase 10.5. We took a look at the racks and MIDI tracks approach and also the instrument tracks approach. In this video, we're going to cover one of the more common approaches to building templates, and that's utilizing instrument tracks and MIDI tracks. Unlike the racks and MIDI tracks approach, instead of loading an instance of Kontakt into the right rack, we're going to load it directly into the left zone as a normal instrument track. Generally, how people tend to work with this method is they'll create the instrument track with Kontakt on, and because it's an instrument track, it'll automatically create one single stereo output in the mixer. They'll then load their patches directly into the instance of Kontakt and then use MIDI channels to control the various different patches. And then when it comes to actually mixing and working with this template, they'll use the initial output to control the overall volume and use quick controls to control the different blends between the microphones. Something to bear in mind is that when you create MIDI tracks connected to an instrument track, it doesn't pull the QC data, so you can control the individual mic blends for the patches inside of Kontakt. So what we need to do is actually hover over this Get Default QCs from Plugin button and click on it, and it will automatically grab that data from the patch. And then using the arrow keys on your keyboard, you can navigate up and down the channels, and then you just need to do this for your other MIDI channels as well. And that means now we will have control over the microphone positions that we have enabled from within our instance of... what's happened here? We've got one too many MIDI channels, that's why. So we'll have control over these different things here, like so. Obviously, these are turned off. Now, most people are happy to have all of the patches of their section come through one output in the mixer. However, if you want to have a fader in Cubase to control the volume of each patch in your instance of Kontakt, then you need to open up your Outputs tab. Go to where it says Presets / batch configurations, click on this, and then from here go to batch functions and then go clear output section and create individual channel for each loaded instrument. When we do this, what will happen is for every patch that we have loaded inside of here, Kontakt will automatically assign that patch to its own output. Okay, so each of these patches has got its own stereo output, and then all we need to do is just enable these inside of Cubase for however many patches we are using. And then what you would do is open up your instance of Kontakt and start labeling things. So I'm going to label that this, that's this, that for that, and that for that. Now the downside to this is that you will have to open up your mixer and also name the new outputs which have been created as well, because those won't be automatically named by default. So for here again, you'd be like low strings, sustains, low strings, blah blah blah. So there's a little bit of setting up involved, but this gives you a fader for each patch in the mixer, so you can control the overall volume of each patch. And then if you want to control the microphone blends, you can use the quick control. So this is a really quick and easy way to start working with your libraries. Very simple, very quick to set up. Now, one downside to this is if you want to have full control over your individual microphone positions, then it's going to start to get a little bit tedious simply because of how things work. So I'm going to completely remove these instances here because I want to load a fresh instance of Kontakt just to demonstrate what I mean. So when you create an instance of Kontakt, by default it creates an audio channel as well because it's an instrument track, and that's on channel 1 and 2 of Kontakt. So this is the default output. Now if I was to go ahead and load a bunch of patches into this, let's just load 3 patches in and then create our MIDI channels to connect to the other 2 patches so we have control over them. And then we name these things. So this is low strings, blah, blah, blah. That's low strings, blah, blah, blah. And that is low strings, blah, blah, blah. Now, let's say we want to have full control over the microphone positions. There are 4 mic positions, so that means we need to name these close, AB, tree, surrounds. and then we need to activate those inside of Cubase, the outputs for them. And then if we bring up the mixer, we shall see, let me just hide some of this stuff we don't need to see so it doesn't get confusing. So we'll see in the mixer here that we have our 2 fresh outputs. We need another one actually, because there's another microphone position, so let's add that one in. So we have our extra 3 microphone outputs. This one is AB, this one's tree, and this one's surround. But the first problem that we actually encounter now is that our initial instance of Kontakt here, our first patch, controls all of these close mics, so it gets a little bit confusing. So if you want to lower just the close mic volume for this patch, that it's going to do the whole section, okay? So this is where this method kind of falls apart when you want to have full control over all of the different microphone positions. You could probably work a way around it, but you're probably then going to be spending way more time, and it would be just easier to use a different approach to building your template, like using the instrument track method or even the racks and MIDI tracks approach, which is a lot more manageable than doing it this way. Now, obviously, everyone realizes that when you use instrument tracks, you have the benefits of the enable and disable function inside of Cubase. Now, there is an inherent drawback with this if you're using instrument tracks and MIDI channels. As soon as you disable an instrument track inside of Cubase with MIDI channels connected to it, and then let's say you've saved this as a part of a track preset or a track archive, which I will discuss in the final video of this series, the initial issue you're going to run into is that the QC data for the MIDI tracks is forgotten. And then when you enable Kontakt again, what will happen is that you'll need to reconnect the QC data for the MIDI channels. So there's an inherent issue there. The other thing with this style of template or the racks and MIDI tracks approach is that there's no real need to utilize the track enable or disable function of Cubase. It's more so for templates that are using a lot of instrument tracks where they've got a single patch of the library loaded onto them. When you're building templates where you've got an instance of Kontakt and a lot of MIDI tracks connected to it, you can save RAM quite easily by using the purge functions. Now, because you've got a lot of patches loaded up into one instance, that means you could go to something like the floppy disk up here, go to global purge, and purge all the samples from this instance of Kontakt. And if you've just built a template and use the purge all function on each individual instance that you have with lots of patches loaded in, then what this will do is effectively reduce your RAM footprint to near enough nothing with the template. Because when you think about how patches work, you load a patch into Kontakt. Kontakt looks at how many samples there are on the keys that are allocated samples in the patch, and it'll load them all by default. And when you purge all of your patches or even purge individual patches, it unloads all of those samples from the keys, and that means they get unloaded from RAM, okay? So if you built a whole template and purged everything, when you go to save it and load it up, nothing's going to be really loaded into RAM because it's been told not to. And just to prove a point with this, I could literally go ahead and disable this and mimic the effect of loading up Cubase again, and you'll notice that nothing will get loaded into RAM because the last thing Kontakt was told to remember was to not load the samples into the RAM. So this is what would happen if you effectively restart Cubase, or if you loaded up a new project with your template where things have been purged. And this is really useful, and what you could do if you wanted to load all the samples back up, you could go to global purge and reload all samples, or if you wanted to keep your memory footprint down, you just compose. You just literally select a patch and start composing. And what would happen is for every key that you press, Kontakt will load the samples into RAM for that key. Now, if you've got a bunch of MIDI here, which is triggering notes, obviously the MIDI is going to trigger the keys, and that will trigger Kontakt to load the samples if they're not loaded. So for me, there's no real need to use the enable or disable function with these style of templates. You could just literally use the purge functions because they're there, and you can do it across multiple patches really quickly and really easily. Whereas if you have an instance of Kontakt with one patch on, you've got a lot of instances of Kontakt for a template, then that's where that gets a little bit more tricky, and the enable and disable function makes more sense. Finally, if you're going to be working with this style of template or the racks and MIDI tracks approach, and you've got a lot of patches loaded up, you've activated all of your outputs, and you've set up your output routing in Cubase from the actual rack here in the right zone, you've got your outputs selected. What I would suggest you do is, once you've done this, is actually save this as a multi, okay? And this will save you from having to redo this at any point in time if you want to. I don't know, if you've got a new computer and you've just moved everything onto it, you just make sure you back up your multi files, which will be, you'll know where they are. When you go to save multi, you can just copy the location and you can chuck them over on another machine, and then when you want to build your template up again, you can just go to the multi rack here, go from the drop down. Let's say I want to load up the harps that I've configured with all the mic outputs pre-set up and everything ready to go. Then I can just literally load this NKI, and you'll see here that all of the harps are loaded. And you'll also notice all the mic positions are activated. They've all been routed, named X, Y, Z, and it's a real quick way to work when using this method. Now, in the next video, I want to move on to talking about track archives and track presets, and where they bring another level of convenience to building your templates in a modular way, and will really take things to the next level in terms of speed and workflow for when you want to piece things together quickly. So thank you for watching. I hope you found this very useful, and it's giving you, these videos are giving you a perspective of the different ways you can go about doing things and the pros and cons of each, and you can then sort of figure out in your own head which method is going to suit your preferences or your style of workflow.